Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new episode of World Panorama, the only show that gives you a 360-degree view of major global news. I'm Sana Khan. Before we get you detailed reports, here's a look at the top stories this week. Xi Jinping takes China's helm with many tough challenges. Will the new leadership result in a new direction for the country? Japan's Prime Minister dissolves lower house of parliament, sets stage for election in December. War looms on Gaza as Gaza-Israel conflict escalates, risks spiraling into an all-out war. And more embarrassment for tainted cyclist. Live Strong Cancer Charity drops Lance Armstrong's name from the title. And straight to the story in focus this week, the Communist Party of China on Wednesday selected a new central committee marking the end of Hu Jintao's 10-year term as General Secretary and paving the way for Thursday's unveiling of new leadership. Months of sharp behind-the-scenes jostling reached a climax on Thursday with this announcement of a new Chinese leadership that, almost regardless of its makeup, is likely to be much like the one that it replaces, perhaps divided and deliberative and weak. The new leadership has been formed not through policy debate, polls or any other institutional mechanism, but, as analysts believe, through horse trading behind closed doors among outgoing leaders and retired party elders. The lack of transparency about the transition of power in the world's second-largest economy highlights the disconnect between a rigidly Leninist political system and an increasingly demanding and internet-enabled population. Now, while China's leadership may have an image in the rest of the world as decisive and all-powerful, the reality is that decision-making tends to be a slow-going affair there. World Panorama takes a closer look at what this leadership means. And for that, I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Bijoy Das. He's a research associate at the Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, or the IDSA. Thank you, sir, so much for joining me this week. Before we get to that, here's a look at this report.
China's ruling Communist Party unveiled its new leadership lineup on Thursday to steer up the world's second-largest economy for the next 5 years. Vice President Xi Jinping took over from outgoing President Hu Jintao as party chief. In a surprise move, Xi was also named head of the party's Central Military Commission. Xi Jinping then led the other newly elected members of the standing to meet the press at the Great Hall of the People.
Our responsibility is to rally and lead the whole party and the Chinese people of all ethnic groups in continuing to liberate our way of thinking, carry on reform and opening further, unleash and develop the productive forces, work hard to resolve the difficulties the people face in both work and life, and steadfastly take the road of prosperity for all.
The other new members of the Politburo Standing Committee, the innermost circle of power in China's authoritarian government, include Premier-in-waiting Li Keqiang and financial guru Wang Qishan, who will be in charge of fighting corruption. Earlier at the closing, the Congress unanimously approved President Hu Jintao's State of the Nation work report and approved a revision to the party charter, further enshrining Hu's theory of sustainable and equitable development.
We are
convinced that all the decisions and plans adopted and all the achievements made at the Congress, which are of major current and far-reaching historical significance, will play an important role in guiding all-round development of the great cause of socialism with Chinese characteristics and the great new undertaking of party building.
Now, the Standing Committee will quickly need to confront a daunting array of problems, the biggest being a slowing economy. It is facing increasingly vocal calls, even from within its own ranks, for a new wave of reforms to pry open the kind of state sector monopolies and vested bureaucratic interests. The new leaders will gradually take over in the next few months, with Hu Jintao's presidency formally coming to an end at the annual parliament session in March 2013.
All right, let me bring my guest in at this point in time. First up, I'd like to ask you, what are the key takeaways that, according to you, in this transition?
The first is that
it is a very well calibrated mix of old and young, reformers and hardliners.
Okay.
Number two is the top two people in the leadership, Xi Jinping and Li Keqiang. They are known to be no-nonsense guys.
Okay.
In his address to in the first speech, it may be noted that Xi Jinping made no mention of ideologies, but straight to the tasks he had.
Right.
This is a great departure from the past.
Right.
And third is that probably because of his background, of their background, they will be more willing to cooperate with other countries, other regimes, other multilateral organizations. But at the same time, he has pressed home the point that the world has also to learn about China.
Right. But would you not agree, because you said it's a mix, you know, of reformists and conservatives, but do you not feel that it's more of the conservatives that are at the helm of affairs, and that would make taking drastic actions, you know, needed to fight some of the problems that China is facing a little more slow?
You see, any formation of a leadership of a country, particularly as huge as China, is born out of its own domestic and political compulsions. No one knows it better than Indians. Having said that, I'll remind our viewers the fact that China is one country in which you don't expect radical changes. Changes come at a gradual phase because it's in nobody's interest, neither China nor any other country, and least of all India, that China goes on radical reforms or radical changes and then it disintegrates. So stability is the key word.
Right.
So what is happening in the background is very slow democratic changes. If you want, I can elaborate on that.
Yeah, sure, please.
What's actually happening is, till now, the Communist Party of China holds the leadership and the authority in the country. And there's a government which is dubbed as a rubber stamp government, which is called, the executive is the National People's Congress.
Right.
Now, and this is, the party event is the National Party Congress, right? Now, there's a proportion of the party members who come and get elected in the National People's Congress. And they then form the government, the main three organs of the state, the government, the Supreme Court, and the Supreme People's Procuratorate.
Okay.
Right. Now, what's happening behind the scenes is the proportion of party members is steadily decreasing in the National People's Congress.
Okay.
And the delegates of National People's Congress are being directly elected from the provinces, from the constituencies.
Okay.
And even in this meet, the Chinese leader Hu Jintao has mentioned that it will be decreased further.
Right.
So that is a big change which is happening very gradually.
Right. That changes happen gradually in China is a point taken, but you know, we all talk about the 21st century and the China is the nation to watch out for. But for that, do you not believe we need to see the Communist Party to change with that, you know, change with the times and perhaps look at, you know, quicker changes?
See, one can always wish for magic solutions to problems, but it doesn't happen, especially in complex countries like India and China. What bothers us is that whether its behavior with the other countries, especially with in problematic relations like India, whether the behavior is consistent or not, whether it is cooperative or not.
Right.
Now, we have a concern over here that the People's Liberation Army, which has some hawkish voices inside them, they are increasingly, this is a concern that they might be increasing their voice for the party, which is actually trying to hold them back. And even in as late as 28th October, when the military transition took place, a major military ideologue, General Luo Yuan, made very strong remarks about territorial issues.
Right.
That China should just go ahead and build its bases in these islands. So what now is to be seen is whether the party, which has absolute control over the PLA and the military, is able to contain such hawkish behavior or not. Till now it has succeeded, actually.
Right. All right, Dr. Das, we'll have to close the show here, but from what you're saying, the future of China, it seems to be changing slowly, but what unfolds in the days to come is uncertain, and we'll have to wait and watch how things unfold with this new leadership as it takes over early next year. Thank you so much for joining me this week on the show. Appreciate you joining us. With that, we take a very quick break, but after that, it's going to be an uphill task for the ruling Democratic Party in Japan. Find out why in just a few moments. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda dissolved the lower house Friday, setting off a 4-week election campaign that promises to be an uphill battle for the ruling Democratic Party of Japan. The dissolution of the lower house, the more powerful of the 2 parliamentary chambers, puts up for grabs its 480 seats, which will be decided on 16 December. Here's the story.
The lower house is hereby dissolved.
Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda of Japan dissolved the lower house of the country's parliament on Friday, setting the stage for general elections next month that could bring losses to his party. The decision, made under pressure from the main opposition Liberal Democrat Party (LDP), is likely to prove unpopular with some members of Noda's own party, the governing Democratic Party. And it could cost him his job.
It's very likely that the LDP will win the election, but it won't be enough to form a government on their own. So they will have to look for coalition partners. There are now new parties forming. There will probably coming new parties out of the failed Democrat government as well. And this will be probably the situation over the next 1 or 2 months until there is a new coalition.
The prospects of a return by the LDP has prompted concerns that former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who polls suggest looks likely to be the next premier, will further fray ties with China, already chilled by a territorial row over a group of islands.
There's a policy row going on, of course, in particular between China and Japan in the current situation. But on the other hand, the economies are already suffering from that. Both economies in China and in particular in Japan need more growth. Companies are absolutely not happy with the current situation, so they are pushing very hard for a solution and moving forward.
Policies in the spotlight include the role of the future of nuclear power after last year's Fukushima disaster and whether Japan should take part in the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a US-led trade pact that Noda favors joining, and how to boost Asia's second largest economy from a long-term lackluster period. These issues, analysts say, are however unlikely to be resolved with the government that comes out of this next general election.
In Japan, we need long-term goals. We need long-term structural reforms. We need fiscal reform. We need long-term growth policies. And this is what hasn't been implemented because leadership was not focusing on the longer term. And it is very unlikely that we will see this in the near future.
The big question now is whether the resulting government will have the unity and vision to enact measures to get the country out of its economic woes. More broadly, the country is wrestling with a huge debt burden and an increasingly aging population, challenges that analysts say will require bold reforms to tackle.
Now, the latest attempt to unite Syria's opposition with US and Qatari support has led to the creation of a new Syrian coalition. Arab League foreign ministers gave this new coalition partial recognition, but did not go so far as to delegitimize the embattled government of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Here's an update. Deadly fighting continues in Syria as Arab and European leaders urge the newly united opposition to seek broader support after it was recognized by the six-nation Gulf Cooperation Council. But Britain and France appear to set further conditions, notably for rallying support inside the country before they grant full recognition to the Syrian National Coalition. And like the United States, Europeans are still reluctant to arm rebel forces which include anti-Western Islamist militants.
Il y a un embargo sur les armes de la part de l'ensemble des pays européens et bien évidemment la France respecte cet embargo. Cela étant dit,
there is an embargo on arms on behalf of all the European countries, and of course France respects this embargo. That said, the decision that has been taken to create a Syrian national coalition is an excellent decision, because it will allow the whole Syrian resistance to reunite in its diversity, and so France entirely supports this national coalition.
La lutte de l'opposition et l'alternative au régime de Bachar el-Assad.
Well, it's a very important milestone and a very big step towards that. We do now want to see the detail of the agreement that was made in Doha implemented, and we want to see in practice that the Syrian opposition, that the coalition that has now been assembled, is as inclusive as possible of opposition groups and of all communities in Syria, and we want to see that they have support inside Syria.
Meanwhile, analysts believe Syria's new opposition coalition may not provide the answer to bringing together fractious rebel groups.
I think the new council faces a great many of the same problems we saw in the last council, the Syrian National Council. It still lacks what we would see as representation from Syria's minority groups, even though 5% of seats are set aside for the Alawites. It still faces the problem of being distant from those on the ground with the guns, and it still faces the problem that ultimately it is an organisation based outside of Syria, and therefore has the problem that it struggles to command the loyalty and legitimacy of those inside the country.
Humanitarian groups reported on Monday that the crisis is worsening for Syrians. The Syrian Arab Red Crescent estimates that 2.5 million people inside Syria have fled their homes and are in need of humanitarian assistance. And David Petraeus' extramarital affair ended months ago, but it continues to make waves in Washington this week as suspicions ripple through lawmaker ranks about the timing of his revelation and the resigned CIA chief's coinciding scheduled testimony into the September 11 attack on the US consulate in Benghazi, Libya.
President Barack Obama assured Americans on Wednesday that the sex scandal that brought down CIA Chief David Petraeus and ensnared another top general has not compromised national security.
I am withholding judgment with respect to how the entire process surrounding General Petraeus came up. And, we don't have all the information yet. But I want to say that I have a lot of confidence generally in the FBI, and they've got a difficult job.
Obama said there was no indication so far that any classified documents had been disclosed as a result of the scandal, but said he will not prejudge the investigation results.
One of the challenges here is that we're not supposed to meddle in criminal investigations, and that's been our practice. I think that there are certain procedures that both the FBI follow or DOJ follow when they're involved in these investigations. That's traditionally been how we view things, in part because people are innocent until proven guilty.
Meanwhile, the U.S. Department of Defense announced the delay of General John Allen's pending nomination to be commander of the United States European Command and Supreme Allied Commander in Europe. The announcement came after the revelation that Allen, the top U.S. commander in Afghanistan, was under investigation for alleged inappropriate communication with a woman at the center of the sex scandal involving Petraeus.
While this matter is under investigation and before the facts are determined, General Allen will remain commander of ISAF. His leadership has been instrumental in achieving the significant progress that ISAF, working alongside our Afghan partners, has made in bringing greater security to the Afghan people and in ensuring that Afghanistan never again becomes a safe haven for terrorists. General Allen is entitled to due process in this matter. In the meantime, the Secretary has asked the President, and the President has agreed to put his nomination on hold until the relevant facts are determined.
CIA chief's departure, sudden and unexpected, appeared to end the public career of a man who played a key role in the Iraq War, led the US Central Command and commanded US and NATO troops in Afghanistan. It also threatened to usher in a period of instability at the CIA, which is grappling with a plateau in its budget after a decade of steady increases and is fending off questions about its performance before and after the attack that led to the death of US Ambassador Chris Stevens in Libya.
We'll wait and see how this story plays out in the days to come. Meanwhile, a short break. On the other side, fans are excited and saddened at the same time as they bid farewell to their favorite Twilight series. Stay tuned. You're watching World Panorama. Now, time to take a look at some of the other international news in a quick wrap. Here's Globe Watch.
Hamas rockets killed 3 Israelis north of the Gaza Strip on Thursday, drawing the first blood from Israel as the Palestinian death toll rose to 13, and the military showdown lurched closer to all-out war with an invasion of the enclave. Earlier on Wednesday, Hamas's military chief was killed when his car was hit by an Israeli airstrike, with multiple Israeli attacks rocking the Gaza Strip. Hamas said Ahmed al-Jabri, who ran the organization's armed wing, died along with a passenger after their car was hit by an Israeli missile. Nobel laureate and Myanmar's pro-democracy icon Aung San Suu Kyi met Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in New Delhi on Wednesday to foster closer ties between the two countries. Speaking at the Nehru Memorial Lecture in New Delhi to commemorate what would have been the 123rd birthday of the former Indian leader Jawaharlal Nehru, Suu Kyi said she hoped India would stand by Myanmar in their last push towards democracy. Citizens of the UK, along with other European countries in heavy debt, held a large-scale protest in Smith Square, London, Wednesday to support the strikes in Spain and Portugal that were held on the same day. More than 1,000 unionists gathered outside the European Commission's main building in Brussels on Wednesday to award a symbolic Nobel Prize for austerity to the EU. Over in Spain, protesters started a series of fires through the streets of Madrid at the end of a 24-hour general strike against spending cuts and tax hikes.
And if you've missed the week's biggest sporting events, here's your chance to catch up. We bring you sports action.
Serbia's Novak Djokovic cemented his place as the world's top tennis player when he dethroned Roger Federer in an enthralling showdown at the ATP World Tour Finals on 12th November. He won to take the title 7-6, 7-5. It was Djokovic's first title at the ATP's Blue Ribbon event since 2008 in Shanghai, and he pocketed the $1.76 million for going through the tournament with the 100% record, having won all his round-robin matches. Former Test opener Justin Langer will leave his position as batting coach with the national cricket team to become head coach of Western Australia. Cricket Australia announced on Wednesday that Queensland Sheffield Shield winning skipper Stuart Law had been appointed Australia's interim batting coach, replacing Langer for at least the next 5 tests, 2 more against South Africa and 3 against Sri Lanka. Lance Armstrong stepped down as a board member of Livestrong, the cancer support charity he founded in 1997. Armstrong, a survivor of testicular cancer, had previously stepped down as Livestrong's chairman. The 41-year-old had his 7 Tour de France victories nullified and was banned from cycling for life last month after the International Cycling Union ratified the United States Anti-Doping Agency's sanctions against him.
Time now for all the very latest news from the world of movies and lifestyle. Here's our entertainment wrap. Thousands of screaming fans lined the black carpet on Monday for the final Twilight film premiere as the cast of Breaking Dawn Part 2 bid farewell to the franchise and its loyal followers. Robert Pattinson, Kristen Stewart and Tyler Lautner led the star-studded carpet in downtown Los Angeles to greet fans, many of whom had camped out for days in advance to catch a glimpse of their favorite stars and see the film before it comes out in theaters on Friday. Breaking Dawn Part 2 changes the dynamic between the lead characters significantly as the epic love story of human Bella Swan, vampire Edward Cullen and werewolf Jacob Black comes to an end with a tantalizing climax. James Bond can don the tuxedo and break out the Dom Perignon after Super Spy returned to theaters in record fashion at the weekend, blowing away box office rivals with $87.8 million in ticket sales. For the US and Canadian debut of the new movie Skyfall, this is the biggest opening in the franchise's history. The best North American opening for the 50-year-old Bond franchise adds to a strong tally of $428.6 million for Skyfall overseas. Globally, the movie starring Daniel Craig as 007 has now earned $518.6 million since first hitting international theaters on 26 October. Some of rock and roll's greatest acts were honored in London on 13 November at the classic Rock Roll of Honor Awards Gala. Texas blues rocker ZZ Top received the night's most prestigious gong as the trio was given the Living Legends Award. Still going strong since their early formation in 1969, ZZ Top have released some of 15 studio albums and sold more than 50 million records. That's all we have for you in this edition of World Panorama. I'll be back next week, same time with more world news. Till then, you can join us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. This week, we wrap up in Japan, where this historical park is illuminating the miniature architectural wonders with colorful holiday lights. Goodbye and thanks for watching.